Chapter 17. The Quarrel in the Farmhouse. "Oh, it is Father Semmet. He will kill us for spying on him," Sadie chattered, clutching at Nancy. "He will have a hard job of it," Nancy said grimly under her breath. "This way, quick!" She popped Sadie into the moldering old linen press, crowded in beside her, and pulled the doors as nearly shut as possible. The stairs creaked again under the weight of someone slowly mounting them. Sadie gripped Nancy's arm, trembling violently as a figure appeared at the head of the steps and paused to survey the attic. "That isn't Semmet," Nancy whispered. "Oh, I'm afraid to look," Sadie sighed. "I have my eyes shut tight, and there's a spider on my neck." "Shh," Nancy warned. "Don't move." The man entered the attic and gave a start as he saw the displaced floorboard. He crouched down to look into the opening and evidently lifted the lids of the boxes. Then he straightened up and scanned the entire chamber. As his face was revealed in the dim light, Nancy almost gave vent to a startled exclamation. The man was Raymond Hill, the wealthy banker from Smith's Ferry, her father's associate in making Asa's will. What was he doing here? Had he betrayed Carson Drew's trust and confidence? Had the lure of old Asa's fortune overcome his scruples too? Nancy was tense as these questions raced through her mind. Meanwhile, Mr. Hill paced slowly around the attic. Nancy was certain he would eventually pull open the doors of the antique and reveal Sadie and herself. A plank creaked under Mr. Hill's feet, and he stopped, stooped, and gave a little chuckle. Nancy saw him pry the nails loose and lift the board. He reached down into the opening and pulled out a metal document box, which sprang open on a touch. From it, Mr. Hill took a bundle of papers, which Nancy recognized at once as being bonds. He looked through them, stuffed the bundle into his pocket, and replaced the loose flooring, after kicking the box out of sight. Nancy was in agony. Her feet were asleep from standing so still in such a cramped place. She was sure a dozen spiders had made a toboggan slide of her backbone. Mr. Hill's eyes roved about the attic and at last lighted on the old linen press. He began to walk toward it slowly, testing the planks beneath his feet at every step. Nancy was undecided whether to bravely emerge from the hiding place or gamble with the chance that Mr. Hill would not open it when a more sinister sight chilled her blood. Standing at the head of the steps, up which he had crept with practiced caution, was Frank Semmet. His eyes gleamed like a cornered rat's, and Nancy saw that he was undecided whether to accost Mr. Hill or to retreat. At that moment, Mr. Hill let his eyes sweep the attic once more, and Nancy saw him stiffen as he detected Semmet. "Ah, there, Mr. Semmet," Mr. Hill said sarcastically. "What are you bringing up here now? Come, let me see what is in that box." Semmet mounted the last step and strode toward Mr. Hill. In his arms he carried a square box tightly wrapped in old newspapers. "I don't know what you are doing up here, trespassing around," Semmet snarled. "But if you want to see what I have, here it is." To Nancy's horror, he hurled his burden full at Mr. Hill. The banker ducked, and a corner of the heavy box caught his shoulder, causing him to lose balance and almost fall. That was the advantage Semmet wanted. Although Mr. Hill was 20 years older than the innkeeper and a smaller man, Semmet rushed forward with flailing fists. Mr. Hill threw up his arms to protect his face, whereupon Semet thrust out a foot and tripped the banker, who fell heavily to the floor. In a flash, Semet was on top of him, one hand gripping Mr. Hill's throat and the other pounding his face and head. "Oh, the coward!" Nancy exclaimed, and burst out of the wardrobe. She stumbled and almost fell as a feeling like pins and needles shot through her ankles. Conquering her discomfort, the girl flew at Semet and seized his shirt collar at the back with both hands.
"Hi, who's that? What?"
Semet choked. He craned his neck, and when he saw that Nancy was his new opponent, he bared his teeth and snarled.
"Let go of me, you little sneak thief, or I'll do worse than this to you."
Nancy's response was to twist her fingers deeper into the man's collar and tug the harder. Realizing that he had an unexpected ally, Mr. Hill squirmed free from Semet's grasp and drove his fist deep into the innkeeper's stomach. Semet straightened out with a gasp, his breath knocked out of him. Mr. Hill then arose, his clothing dirty and rumpled, his face rapidly swelling with discolored bruises. "Why, Nancy! And Sadie, too! How did you get here?" the banker gasped. "We were here first," Nancy said. "We heard you coming, and not knowing who it was, we hid in the antique over there." "To think of that," Mr. Hill groaned. "Then did you pull up that loose plank over there?" "Yes, we were just going to look in the boxes when you frightened us," Nancy replied. Mr. Hill shook his head, and what was meant for a smile appeared on his battered features. "Nancy, I owe you not only thanks, but an apology," he said. "I was afraid your father was giving you a bigger job than you can handle when he put you on watch here. So I came back determined to spend the night prowling about, to be on hand in an emergency. I saw Semet coming from this direction and retraced his path to find out what he had been up to, away back here. I found the old house, and you know the rest." Semet, clutching his middle, rose shakily to his feet. "Shall I call the police, Sadie, and have this man arrested?" he asked painfully. "Arrest me!" shouted Mr. Hill. "Arrest Mr. Hill? Why?" Sadie and Nancy gasped in chorus. "Why, for trying to steal old man Sidney's valuables, of course," Semet replied. "Why else do you think he was poking around here, where Mr. Sidney used to hide his things?" "Of all the false statements," the banker bellowed, losing his dignity. "You are the thief. I know all about you." "Ha, ha! Deny if you can that you took a sheaf of bonds from under the floor and have them in your pocket this minute," Semet challenged. "I don't deny it at all, and here are the bonds," Mr. Hill declared, disclosing the securities. "I didn't steal them. Whoever hid them there stole them." "Tell that to the judge," jeered Semet. "Old Asa hid them there himself." "May I see the bonds?" Nancy asked. She examined the papers carefully. 12 crisp engraved bonds of $500 denomination each, and each one issued by the Midwestern Gas and Power Company. "These are the bonds that arrived in the mail the day before Mr. Sidney died," she said, returning them to Mr. Hill. "So he did not put them here himself at all. Those issues were in the envelope which you, Mr. Semet, passed through the window to your wife." Semet looked exactly as if he had received another blow on the chin.
"Prove it!"
he spluttered. "Deny it if you can," Nancy cried, stamping her foot. Semet shook his head in mock dismay.
"Come along, Sadie," he said.
"Both these would-be smart crooks are trying to rob you of your inheritance. Come on back to the house, and I will drive to River Heights at once and ask for a county detective to guard you.
and we'll hunt up a lawyer without smarty daughters.
No, I don't ever want to be with you again, Sadie cried, throwing her arms around Nancy. Go away, please, and stay away.
You'll be sorry you said that someday, my fine lady,
Semet said with a forced laugh.
When these new friends of yours have stripped you of everything you own except your oldest clothes, then you'll come around begging Frank and Emma to be good to you again.
Nancy looked at Semet from under level brows. There is a little matter of an ebony box with brass binding that was put under a wood pile, she said slowly. The story that chest can tell might mean that any visits you will have from Sadie will be in the state penitentiary. Semet opened his mouth once or twice, then turned and marched down the dark stairs. End of chapter 17.